Let's go around the room and we'll say hello to Martha, who is our newest trustee from Greene County. So Martha, of course, I'm David. Nice to see you again. And we'll go to Krista.
Hi, Martha. I'm Krista Farrell, and I started at JMRL out of Greene County a very long time ago in the old building. So I recognize your name from then, but I'm the Central Library Branch Manager now. I'm the Assistant Library Director.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Camille Thompson. I'm the branch manager at Gordon Avenue Library.
Kathy.
Hello, I'm Kathy
Hello.
Thompson Harris. I am the representative from Charlottesville City.
And behind me,
Good to meet you all.
hiding, Sierra. Sierra, do you want to say hi? You don't have to show your face.
Right back. Green when I did minutes there.
And then Tony, president, of course, is remote. So Martha, would you like to say anything?
Well, hello, and thank you all for welcoming me to the committee.
Great. Let's get started, and then when Mike gets here, we'll dig into it. But there's a lot to cover today. Most of it, I think we've already discussed a bit, but the newest one here is proposed policy 1.211. So it's a whole new thing, and it is remote participation of library trustees. So we have been operating the library board and all library committees under Albemarle County's continuity of governance ordinance, which we are also operating under today. Albemarle County ended their state of emergency almost 6 months ago, and the ordinance allowed for a return to normal governance after the end of 6 months. So that means that beginning in mid-September, the library board and library committees are going to have to return to in-person meetings. There is a new state law going into effect September 1st that draws out some specific scenarios in which board members can remotely participate, or the whole board can have a virtual only meeting. And one of the requirements there is that the board have a policy in place that addresses these. So we do have a policy, which I worked on with JMRL's attorney, and largely it says what's in the state law. And I think that this group needs to decide whether or not it's ready to go through the full board on Monday, and then whether or not we would like the full board to actually vote on it. So normally for policies, what we do is we have a first reading in one meeting, so the board has a chance to think about it. And then a month later, at the next board meeting, vote on it. Since this law goes into effect September 1st, if we were to do it that way, then it would preclude some remote participation in September. All right.
And Martha, as my agenda for this is, I have a sort of medical exemption, if you will, for attending in-person meetings, and I was hoping to, use that as part of this policy. As the, as we can see, as we go through the policy, there's an exemption for personal medical conditions. So.
Okay, so hopefully everyone had a chance to look at it, but I think it's useful probably to go through, even though it's 4 pages. We'll try to hit the high points. Okay, so the purpose of this policy is to describe the circumstances in which we would have an all virtual public meeting, the library board would, and it fixes the number of times for remote participation for personal matters, or all virtual public meetings can be used per calendar year.
I just had a wandering 4-year-old come in. Excuse me. Sai, I'm in a meeting right now, sweetheart. You need to be down at Cherry House. Will you please go now? I need you to be out of the house now. I'm going to count down from 5, and you're good to go. Thank you, sir. Wow, you're so fast. Whoa. Thank you.
That's very impressive. You didn't even have to start the count.
Yeah, right.
I got to 3.
Oh.
I did on my fingers. Yeah, we got a verbal and visual.
Okay, so let's go through it here. So let's start with 2A, grounds for remote participation, advance notice of the chair. So individual members may use remote participation with these caveats that we're about to get into. Instead of attending a public meeting in person, if in advance of the public meeting, the member notifies the chair that either they have a personal medical condition, so that means the member has a temporary or permanent disability or other medical condition that prevents the member's physical attendance, There are no limits on the use of that condition. Whether they have a family member's medical condition that prevents them from coming, they have a family member, a medical condition of a member of the member's family.
Huh.
So we need to wordsmith that a bit. But that member requires the member to provide care that prevents the member's physical attendance. Oh, Mike. A medical condition of a member of the, let's just say trustee.
Would that be immediate family?
Well, this is
The
based on
trustees,
this is based on the state law, and it does not specify. It just says family
Okay.
member. So I think the broader that we would keep it, the closer to the state law, probably the better there.
Mhm.
Distant meeting location. Oh, I'm sorry for that 2A2, the family member's medical condition. There also are no limits to the use of that, as far as I can tell, and the lawyer can tell, the use of that exemption. The distance from the meeting location. So the member's principal residence is more than 60 miles from the meeting location identified in the required notice for such meeting. So this doesn't mean I'm out of town. This means the meeting is more than 60 miles away from your house. So none of our trustees' homes are more than 60 miles away from the Northside Library, which is where we generally meet. But there will be circumstances when, say, we have a meeting in Greene County and Alita in Nelson County might be more than 60 miles away that she could participate remotely. Okay, or the final one is an identified personal matter. The member is unable to attend the meeting due to a personal matter, such as a family event or business commitment, and identifies with specificity the nature of the personal matter. However, the member may not use remote participation due to personal matters more than 2 meetings per calendar year, or 25% of the meetings held per calendar year, rounded up to the next whole number, whichever is greater. So for the library board members, that's 3 meetings per year. 25% of the 12 meetings is 3 meetings. Okay? So those are the reasons. Go ahead, Martha.
Is there any determination of how much in advance one would have to notify somebody?
Well, we should talk about that procedurally because we'll get into it here, but the lawyer for JMRL feels that the only way that this can happen is if there is a physical quorum in the building. So of the 9 members of the board, at least 5 of them have to be at, we'll use Northside as an example, have to be at Northside in order for the other 4 to be able to use these exemptions, or else it wouldn't be an official board meeting. So because of that, I would think that the library board member who's not going to be there would need to notify the chair as soon as they can. Sometimes things will pop up. If it's a medical thing, it might pop up the day of, but there's a chance that if there's not good communication here, a meeting will not have a quorum and no business can be conducted.
Which is true of a regular meeting, correct? I mean, if we don't have a quorum for a regular meeting anyway, we can.
Correct. That's true of a meeting, but my concern here, Tony, is that if the day of 3 people call you and say, oh, hey, I'm out of town, I'm sick, my sister's sick, something like that, and then everybody else comes here or the public comes, there's a scheduled meeting that then is not an official meeting because we didn't have enough prior notice.
Right, yeah.
So is it a simpler way to say that in the lawyer's opinion, remote participants never count, quote unquote, for purposes of a quorum?
I think we haven't gotten to the point yet where we describe that scenario, and when we get to it, we can kind of poke at the language there a little bit.
Okay, that was my second question is where I want to see if that's covered here. But is that true just in terms of the basic point
that
when you're determining a quorum, it doesn't matter how many remote participants there are, that none of them can count towards a quorum?
That is Jim's interpretation.
Okay.
Of the law here. Yeah. The next section goes into a little bit of specificity about what the minutes for the board have to say. So this is Sierra's ears are perking up, I'm sure, as she is the official secretary for the library board. So if a member participates through electronic communication for any of those 4 reasons we just went to, it says basically if it's a medical condition, in the minutes, the fact that a member participated through electronic means due to and then it's just the same language as above, a temporary or permanent disability or other medical condition that prevented their physical attendance, or same for a family member. So that one doesn't have to get specific. It doesn't have to say, you know, I have monkeypox. Just say, you know, there's a medical reason I can't come to the meeting. Same for the distant meeting location. If the participation is approved, then the JMRL shall also include in its minutes the fact that the member participated through electronic means due to the distance between the member's principal residence and the meeting location. Okay. And then an identified personal matter. So if participation is approved pursuant to paragraph 2A4, the JMRL shall also include in its minutes the specific nature of the personal matter. That's as clear as the guidance says. So I don't know what that means really, but that there has to be some sort of, here's the reason that somebody is using a personal matter to remotely participate. Jim gave a few examples earlier. He said, you know, business that took you away, or family emergency. So I don't think it has to be extremely specific. If it's a personal matter, we don't really need to put that in the notes, but it has to be more specific than just saying it's a personal matter.
Can I,
Yes.
just looking at B, and maybe you cover this, and I apologize if so. If participation by a member, I'm looking at minutes, through electronic communication means is approved by a quorum of the library board physically assembled. So does that mean we now have essentially an action item at every meeting to endorse the remote participants?
Yeah, there's going to have to be a vote every time there's a remote participant.
Okay.
Right. I mean, we never have an official agenda item for do we have a quorum, but maybe we could put the two together as a standing agenda item. You know, item 1, quorum present, question mark, remote participation granted, yes, no type thing. The way we have with trustee public, you know, continuing education, et cetera.
Or minutes?
I'm not seeing where that is laid out here though, so I'm hoping we're going to get to it. If not, we do need to go in and put some information about what constitutes a quorum and the fact that the board needs to vote. Okay. When the chair requests to participate electronically, in the event the chair seeks to participate through electronic communication means, the chair must notify the vice chair on or before the day of the meeting. So that's more specific than the non-chairs, Martha, to answer your earlier question. This says on the day or before. The secretary or clerk will arrange for the voice of the absent member to be heard by all persons in attendance at the meeting location. If for any reason the voice of the member cannot be heard, the meeting may continue without the participation of the absent member. So I think we should actually change that, because it's not, ultimately that's going to be my responsibility.
Yeah.
Say library staff, or?
I mean, that's anybody flowing down from there, basically. I could say or designee. All right, so I think there's some things that weren't exactly covered there that we'll see if they come up later on. But Mike's question about how do you determine, you know, that the quorum has to be in the room, I don't see there, but I know that it's in here somewhere. So let's keep going.
Well, if you go back to C, is the chair, right, yeah. Is the chair really going to notify the secretary directly? It seems to me our usual practice is that the director is kind of the focus for all the
Yeah.
So we're saying that the chair must notify the vice chair or the presiding officer, and should notify the library director. So I don't want to come to September's meeting. On September 10th, I send Alita a message saying I'm not going to be there, and I CC David.
That would accomplish that C there, yes.
And I hate to say, maybe you should redline this, because this is part of the meeting handouts. So the other trustees will be looking at an old version, and they need to be able to see the changes. make these two changes so far?
It's already in red.
We line it, whatever.
I have to blue line it.
But I think it was good to get that heads up out to the trustees with those handouts, but
What do we think of green? No, that doesn't show up well on the. That's gonna look like a link.
Magenta.
Thank you, Mike. Good suggestion. Okay, so that's one set of circumstances for individual trustees to remotely participate. The next set of circumstances are all virtual public meetings, which means that there is no physical location, neither for members of the public or for the trustees. It's all virtual, which we haven't done. This board hasn't done since summer of 2020, I think. There's been some sort of in-person option available. Okay. Go ahead.
before we get into this, we could choose to allow ourselves that option or choose to not allow ourselves.
Yes, that's up to the board.
So if we as a committee say, hey, we've always had a in-person nexus, we could choose to just strike all this and say we're not going to allow ourselves that option. Is there any interest in that in the room, or do we think it's worth having the option?
I think it's worth having the option, even if we never use it. North side burns down, you know, we need to have a board meeting, God forbid, something like that. So
We could go to Central or Gordon if that happens.
They all burn.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
My feeling about that is that I would rather, so I'm glad that the policy committee can talk about it, but that seems like a board, I think the board would have to make that call, basically.
yeah, I agree.
If you were to ask my personal opinion, I would say leave it in because it's.
Our role is to discuss,
Make a
have a
recommendation.
little more time and make a recommendation. And of course, the board can further discuss and change it.
All right, so here are the rules. Basically, it says the meeting notice must indicate that the meeting, it's either all in person or all virtual. So starting next month, it needs to say, where it says hybrid now on your board agenda, it will have to say either in person or virtual, if virtual is the option. With a statement notifying the public that the method that they're choosing to meet shall not be changed unless you provide a new meeting notice. So we can't post the meeting and then change it at the last minute. It has to be within the notification, which is, I think, 3 days, basically. So if there was some sort of change is what this is going on about. Public access to the meetings must be provided by electronic communication means. The electronic communication means used must allow the public to hear all members of the JMRL participating, and when audio-visual technology is available, to see them as well. So Martha, you had a question about that. Bandwidth issues where sometimes sometimes the visual component is not available. So I think the law says you have to be able to hear, that the public and the other members of the board have to be able to hear, seeing when it's available. So if your bandwidth didn't allow for it, it wouldn't be available. A phone number or other live contact info must be provided to alert JMRL or the if the audio or visual goes down. So we always do provide a phone number as well. That phone number is actually a Zoom phone number. So if the Zoom crashes, then that we'll have to look for some other, we have to tell people like call my office or something like that. And we would have to recess. So obviously if the Zoom crashed, we would have to recess anyway because none of the board members would be available. Copy of the agenda and all agenda packets must be made available to the public. So that's standard practice anyway. There has to be a method for public comments, including written comments, same way it's customarily received. So nothing here is different from what we've been doing since we started hybrid meetings. No more than 2 members can be together in one remote location unless it's also open to the public. So, if we were going to, Tony, if you were to call an all virtual meeting, and Mike and Kathy and I were to sit here in this room to host it, there couldn't be a third person.
I was just about to ask, would it be, is a restriction for any member, any person with JMRL, or is it only board members? So,
Just 2 members of the JMRL, which is vague.
right, well, I'm asking what the legal requirement is.
I believe it's,
You know, because if there's 3 staff members, if it's you and Sierra and Krista, can you be in a?
yeah,
Say we're
good
gonna-
question. I believe it is board members.
Well, it looks like there's a missing word really, because it says the JMRL.
Yeah.
In this,
The regional library, so.
I know, but that, it still seems to me like there's a missing word somewhere.
Oh wait, this is not it. Shoot. These are the definitions, not the actual code. It's gonna go great for my law school application.
I was gonna say, now you're a lawyer too, right?
Yeah. So what was the language? It was no more than,
2 members of
JMRL
the
member.
The
organization.
JMRL, yeah.
more than 2 members. I'm not sure. We'll have to check on that, but I would say my gut says if adding the word board here, because there's no,
Yeah, my guess is that's the.
there's no restriction ever on how many library staff members can get together. There is no public meeting. The only public body are the trustees.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking that, you know, board was missing from that definition.
So maybe you can put a comment there and run that by council before Monday, if at all possible. If you-
And would it have to be Board of Trustees, all spelled out there?
It wouldn't hurt.
What was the
Or you could just put trustees then, instead of members of.
So that would change it. Go ahead, Kathy.
why was it 2 members and not 3 members? And the reason I asked that is I've served on several boards, and they said 3 are together.
It's a public meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's what this is trying to say. It's saying no more than 2. So basically it's saying 3 or more. I agree that that language is probably better, but this is the language that the law uses.
well, we'll go with the law.
I'm afraid we're gonna, we're gonna have to have some ugly words here. Much as the policy committee usually likes to try and make everything, concise and manageable for the public, this one is strictly a down and dirty legal document. Okay, if a closed session is held during an all virtual public meeting, transmission of the meeting must resume before the votes to certify the closed meeting. That's the same as always. Number and frequency may not convene in all virtual public meeting more than 2 times per calendar year or 25% of the meetings held. So that would be 3 times out of the year, and cannot hold consecutive all virtual public meetings. So there can't be 2 meetings of the board in a row that are all virtual. Meetings must include the fact the meeting was held by electronic communication means and what those means were.
Backing up just a second.
Yeah.
Do we have to put, I mean, we've got the JMRL, but it's for the JMRL what? Do we need to define earlier that JMRL in this instance means JMRL, the Board of Trustees, or, I mean, because it says JMRL, that would mean everything.
Yeah, it seems like we need to
So-
add words.
Because it's been defined as the library, but not as the body we're talking about.
I think you're okay here. Martha, because it's talking about a public meeting. So I think that means something very specifically for the state law. You know, they mean they're worried about the public body here. They're not worried about like a Krista's book discussion that was at lunch today. There are no legal requirements for that to be in person or not. But if we're concerned about it, we can always add Board of Trustees wherever we see that.
Well, I would suggest at the very top, when you have the definition, add Board of Trustees and ask Lori what he thinks.
Yeah, because there's a difference between the library and the library board of trustees.
Right. No,
Well, I think it should be in here too.
yeah, I do agree. Yeah, the title. And then right where it says Jefferson Madison Regional Library, just add Board of Trustees and leave here and after JMRL. So from now on, JMRL means the Board of Trustees.
Martha, does that satisfy your?
Yeah, I think that clarifies it.
Okay.
And it keeps us from having the right Board of Trustees all over the place.
Yeah, thank you.
In which case, you can remove the Board of Trustees you added.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Where were we?
We're consecutive meetings. We got through that. Minutes, I think we were on minutes.
Okay, so just as the minutes have to say, you know, how this electronic board meeting was held. If a member's participation from a remote location pursuant to this subsection is disapproved because such participation would violate this policy, such disapproval should be recorded in the minutes with specificity. I'm not real sure what that means, but it's recommended by our legal advice. Okay, and then the next section is about committees, so that would be including this body. Any committees of the JMRL may hold an all public virtual meeting. The requirements for committee all virtual meetings are set forth in section A3AJ above. And Camille points out that that's backwards. It should say all virtual, or it just needs the word public. Is that right?
Public, all virtual, right?
Yeah, well, it's just wrong. It's not all public virtual, it's all virtual public.
In the highlighted part, same thing.
All public virtual. Oh, that's where the problem
Yeah,
is.
that's
Right?
the problem. All public, whatever that.
All virtual. Public. This is fun.
Yeah.
Really?
Okay, I think this is a very small section, but it's important for the way that JMRL operates here. That the requirements for committees for all virtual meetings are also going to be 2 per year or 25% of the normal committee meetings. So the JMRL committee meetings are going to, the chairs are going to have to really talk to committee members to figure out, if we can't do it in person, what are the rules and regulations? Like this body right here generally meets 6 times a year, right? So that would be, you know, 2 meetings of that could be a virtual meeting, but if somebody's not going to be there, they would have to work with Mike and myself to figure out whether or not, you know, they have exceeded their allotment. Now, our lawyer's interpretation is that the committees are separate from the overall board, so that you could have up to 3 remote participations for personal reasons for the full board, and then your clock would be different for the committee work.
Each committee. Right.
That's my understanding. Does that make sense?
And then do we, in committees, it's always sort of this consensus. I don't think we have real, I've never had a vote where it was, you know, with the question of quorum, is there such a thing as a committee quorum? it now comes to my mind.
My understanding, and this could be wrong, and Tony's got more experience here than I do probably, but my understanding is that committees don't actually vote on library business.
Right.
They can
Right.
make a recommendation to the library board. So we
Right.
might vote on, do we want to make this recommendation, but it's not binding in any sense. So we have never operated in that we would need a quorum for a committee meeting. Okay, so I think there are some things missing here. Specifically about that quorum, I didn't actually see it addressed anywhere. This was just, I had asked the lawyer this and he told me. So I think that should go up near the top somewhere where there's some talk about quorums.
Okay, but also we have individual, so show me, I'm sorry if I redirected, but I'm still on the last topic a little bit. There's the full board, and then there are committees. And where does it say, and so I see at the end of the all virtual meetings where it mentions committees. And where does it talk about
we need something about
participation in a regular committee meeting? Is that in here? And then that would also, I think, need to articulate this separate counters idea that we just talked about. I thought the whole thing was getting cut and pasted again. I thought we were about to read the whole other thing, except it was going to say committees every time.
I'm just checking out something. I apologize.
No.
Okay, so that would be either rewriting this to say all virtual and remote participation with JMRL committees, or it would be writing a new bullet point.
My inclination would be, it seems to me there's two topics here: remote participation in a regular meeting, and we should cover committee at the end of that with a bullet. And then there's all virtual meetings, and then we already cover committee with a bullet at the end of that.
So that would go like under this section 2. Individual participation, really non-emergency individual
I
participation.
think so.
Yeah.
So it would be E. 2E, basically, I think.
I just copied and pasted that as a place to start, basically. So it'll all be blue.
So maybe it's remote part, let's see, non-emergency individual participation in committees. Yeah.
Participation. Okay, so did you wanted to add, Mike, the non-emergency?
Not necessarily, no, not necessarily. Oh yeah, I see later it talks about remote participation. So yes, I agree that remote participation is a better.
I may be missing something, but you stated that committee meetings and regular board meetings, should that not be defined somewhere? Maybe I missed it. That this does not refer to the committee meeting attendance.
Yeah, I don't think it's specifically defined. I
Did
think
we do that, or is that just subtly understood?
I think it's defined in state code. You know, they talk about the official meetings of the body versus committees and subcommittees or whatnot. But if it's important, we could do it here or somewhere. I mean, let's get this done and then we can look at that. Set forth in sections. This is section
4.
Wait, it's up here though. This is section 2. A through D, basically. Is that right?
I think just A. A is the grounds. Then
But all the other things hold,
B
right?
is minutes. C would hold. Minutes, I don't think necessarily.
Let's try that. Okay, so Kathy's point is that it's not really defined in here what a committee is. It is defined in the law at the very end. Somewhere. Maybe not. Oh, this is the old law. During states of emergency. Situations other than states of emergency. So in the law itself, it says any public body that creates a committee, subcommittee, or other entity may, however designated of the public body to perform delegated functions of the public body or to advise the public body, may also adopt a policy on behalf of its committee, subcommittee, or other entity that shall apply to the committee, subcommittee, or other entity's use of individual or remote participation. So we're trying to get these two things together. That still doesn't really, there's a set of definitions somewhere. So I tend to agree, Kathy, with that suggestion. Or are we covering it just by saying, you know, remote participation in committees? Everything else is full board meetings.
I'm satisfied with that everyone knows what a committee is, just like the law kind of seems to assume everyone knows what it is.
Mhm.
But you could ask lawyer if you're
Ask the
asking
lawyer,
lawyer things, you know, does this require a definition?
Okay, Kathy, so I'll run that by the lawyer and see what he says. All right, so I think, Mike, thank you. We've got that sorted out. Now the question is about, so what Jim told me is that the library board, the approval, there's a disapproval section here, but the approval needs to happen by a vote of the library board. How is that going to work for committees, though? Like that, we just said committees don't vote on anything.
Yeah, I would, I mean, what I just read on the law is that the committee can kind of make up its own rules.
As long as there's a policy that covers it.
I'd like to kind of just cover all the bases with a standard, you know, a standard procedure for committees and policy for committees. But does it need to just talk itself?
Oh, here's where it says, in the minutes section, it says, if participation by a member through electronic communications means it's approved by a quorum of the library board physically assembled pursuant to paragraph 2. So I think that does cover that base. Okay, so for board members here, do you understand what the conditions are that would allow you to remotely participate? This is to cover our, you know, this is to say we have a policy in place, but does this help you at all to say what are the conditions in which I could participate remotely?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clear that you have to, unless there's an emergency, you have to notify both the board and the library director if you're the director, or just the library director if you're just a board member. And it does say on the day of the meeting or prior to, so it could be either, right?
I think they're supposed to notify you as well, Tony, per this,
Right.
by the chair and the director, which is what usually, you know, somebody will tell me, you know, if Kathy can't make a meeting, she'll tell me I can't make it, then I'll tell Tony.
Right.
We're short somebody.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think there needs to be a broader discussion at the board meeting about, you know, the numbers here and how many times people would be allowed to do this, and the fact that we need to coordinate this. That remains my concern, is that if it's not coordinated, we're going to end up with meetings in which the board doesn't have a quorum. then I think the other question is whether or not so clearly we've got a few questions that need to be answered here. But whether or not the library board would want to try to vote on this on Monday, or they want to read it and vote on it in September.
If they read it and vote on it in September, what are we going to do for people who want to participate virtually in September?
Yeah, I think they'd be,
It's a question of the board, but the answer is they're subject to existing state law, you know,
Yeah.
starting on the day.
they'd have to attend in person. Because the policy's not in place, basically. But it's a catch-22 because we have to have the meeting in order to vote on it. If we were to follow normal procedure, which was to read it one month and vote the next month.
Well, I think when we present this to the full board on next Monday, I think we should say that. I think, you know, if we follow our normal policy where we read it one month and vote on it the next month, we are going to be left in a catch-22 situation in September if we need to invoke it. Therefore, we, the policy committee, would like a temporary suspension of our usual protocol and would like you to be, you know, would like the board's approval of this so that we don't have any discontinuity of operations.
Is the reason for that having the presentation and then the voting at the next meeting, so then the public can have comment? And if that's the reason, how would public be able to comment on the change to policy before
I
it
think
was
that's
approved?
That's one of the goals of that methodology, Martha, is to make sure not just that the board has a chance to deliberate, but that the public has a chance to weigh in. I think the counter argument would be, well, this was publicly posted. This policy was publicly posted last week, you know, this week for the meeting coming up. So it's been available for people to comment on coming up on Monday's meeting would be, I would think, the counter to that, but certainly not as transparent as what you described.
And a second question, this is just, I don't have the knowledge base. Why would a person participating virtually be considered not part of a quorum?
That's the state. I mean, yeah.
That's the interpretation that our lawyer gave us of what the state law says.
So we don't know.
Right. Makes no sense. We don't know. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that might be something that would get clarified over time. You know, but I think that this policy as crafted is designed to be as conservative as possible in the broadest interpretation of what the current law is. It's new for everybody. It takes effect September 1st. So this is attempting to cover all the bases, and then as these things get sorted out over time, it might be tweaking. So I think that minus a few questions that we're ready to present this to the library board on Monday, and then it's up to the board to decide what they want to do with it at that point.
Now, because it's a policy committee, Mike, that means it's usually your job to present these things. You okay with that?
But I can delegate to. I get David's help all the time.
If you look at the agenda, though, it has a separate agenda item,
Oh, okay, right.
because I think it's such an important thing. So I would think, Mike, during your report on the policy committee, you could say we discussed it,
So we
and
discussed it,
we're
and
going to have a lengthy
I
conversation.
mean, I think it's fair to say we kind of fine-tooth it. That's a hyphenated comment, you know, from a committee member. And then it's been back through the lawyer twice, hopefully, if we can.
Yeah, that's a tough turnaround.
Right. And here's what it all says, and then, yeah, I can discuss it, but I think David is more fluent with, you've done all the back and forth.
Yeah, I would think that during the committee report, you would say we discussed it and it's up on the agenda later, and then we would have a full discussion about it. Good. All right, anything else on this? It's, you know, I know one of the goals of the policy committee the last few years has been to have concise, short policy.
Yeah.
Makes sense to the public, and this is basically the opposite of that, but you know, as we.
Yeah, I think we get an out here. I think,
Yeah.
not our fault. Yeah.
All right, well then, Mike, can I turn back over the driving?
Sure.
To you?
So next on the agenda is suggestions and complaints.
Formerly known as.
Yes, the previous, and so what were the open issues at the end of last meeting and what has changed since then?
At the end of last meeting, the policy committee asked me to bring this back to the JMRL managers for review. And we did so, and we got a few, so the red lines here are suggestions that came from JMRL's branch and department heads, basically, and there was two things. This first line here came from a collection development department who wanted to make sure that the public reading this would realize that there's a separate place. We use the same word, suggestion, for book purchase. That's a separate process than this is. If somebody wants the library to add a book, we don't want them to end up using this form. Now, that might change over time. So the blue line there and the strike through was from our digital services coordinator who said, let's keep it very broad because eventually we might end up with a one source. You know, whether you choose this or that, it drops at one place or another. But our workflow as is requires a separate suggestion for book purchase form. Questions about that? So the sentence would be suggestions for additions to the library collection can also be submitted on paper at each location or electronically.
I think I would be inclined to put back via the library's website or something. So electronically is very broad. I guess I could email you, email someone, that's an electronic submission. I can text someone, that's electronic submission.
And we accept those.
Yeah.
If somebody emails me and says, you have this book, I send it to Sierra and Meredith and they review it in the same way.
Right. Yes, but part of this is to inform the public, what do we want you to do? We have a mutual goal of getting your collection suggestions. What's the best way to accomplish that? I think it might be to everyone's benefit if we at least have a hint, go to the website to do it. I mean, or maybe is electronically obvious does it obviously mean website or not? I don't know.
I think Sarah's main concern was the fact that, so right now that all lives on the JMRL catalog. And these are actually, they're two separate entities really, which is a whole other
Point of view of the public, not really.
The public doesn't care, right? They just want to know. So you're suggesting can also be submitted on paper at each location or via web form or via the.
I say electronically at JMRL's website.
However, I think it should be broad because we're dealing with the public.
Sure.
And the public has different ways of communicating. And everybody
Yeah.
doesn't have that capability possibly or that education.
I think we would definitely.
Both ways. I absolutely, Kathy, agree. We want to have all of the above and what works for you, but also if I'm a member of the public and I want to know how do I do this, I want kind of some instructions of what do you want.
Then we start, then there's the question of like, well, what is that? That's getting too, like we want the public to be able to look at this because they might come to it and say, somebody might come to this and say, I want to suggest that the library purchase a book. And this policy isn't really about that. So this is kind of a little caveat. I think we would leave in can be submitted on paper because we get paper suggestions for book purchases all the time.
Yeah.
I'm kind of concerned a little bit about suggestions in here. Reading through it, I feel a little confusion. What we're trying to get are suggestions for improvement to services, but then we use the word suggestions again for additions to the library collection. I think we need to work, I don't know what word to use, but I think we need to work on it. Yeah, it's got to be wordsmithed a little bit, I think, and to make that a little bit clearer. I don't have a suggestion, no.
Did you do
Requests is what I'm hearing from Krista.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, I like that word, yeah.
I mean, we could also just leave this out. This was Meredith's suggestion to try and help the public understand that there's another way to ask for a book to be added. But do we need that here?
I think we do. I think we do, because when I think about a suggestion, I'm suggesting a book, this clarifies it.
Okay, so requests for additions to the library collection can also be submitted on paper at each location or electronically. And Mike, you still are interested in some
That's
clarification?
not a hill I need to. What do you all think? Is it useful to include a little more guidance on where your best electronic destination is, or just leave it completely broad?
Can we refer directly to the policy is there another policy that covers the request for purchase?
I think it's probably buried in the
Collection policy?
materials.
Okay, so that probably.
so we could include a link directly to here's the form to request on, but then I try to shy away from that, because if that changes, if that moves, then well, you have to remember here's where it changed. I mean, that would be the best and easiest thing. It's like there's a link right here, you click on it and you fill out, I want to add this book.
But is it too much? Would it be useful to put or electronically, comma, as described in 4.21 material selection
In
policy?
there.
Good question.
Uh,
It's gotta be.
I was going to look. You might be faster than me. You are faster so far. Well, even if it is it even worth putting that, or is it just too much, too many words and trail of crumbs you got to follow?
So this is the material selection policy, and it says the library welcomes suggestions from library users for titles of various collections. All suggestions are considered, not all titles. This doesn't say how to do it. It just says we.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not sure that the policy manual actually has to be the place that says how you do all these things. But we want to make it, if that's the place that people go to, we want them to leave with some sort of answer. Call Meredith.
Right.
I think I'm okay with that
Yeah.
as is.
Okay.
And then the other thing was something that the policy committee added last month. This feedback may be shared with the library board or the general public at the discretion of the library director. Or maybe Mike, that might have been offline in conversation when you and I were talking about it.
Look, to the extent it may have been offline, the goal here is for people to have an expectation of what's going to happen when in terms of disclosure of what I might submit.
Yeah, oh, right. So, right. Thank you for the reminder. So this is just so people know, if you share, it's a public document, basically, if you send something in to the library, there's the chance that I will share that with the library board, or we might get a FOIA request for, if you send something in about, oh, I don't like the new, remote participation policy, and then we get a FOIA request for every communication about that, your suggestion is part of that. So I think this was a nice thing to do to make sure people do that.
If we have the request for reclassification at the bottom, does it make more sense to put the request for purchase down there at the bottom, along with sort of like, these are other things you might be trying to suggest to us, and this is where you go?
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So this would go down here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
But
better.
above and make it a separate. The last is almost a boilerplate.
Okay. So are we ready to present this to the board on Monday?
I think so.
Do you have to put dates at the bottom of it?
Yeah, we'll fix the dates after the board votes on it, then I'll change the date. So we'll probably get rid of this minor update. The minor update, Martha, was when we changed our reclassification or reconsideration policy. We had to go back and every place that was mentioned, update the policies there. Okay, great.
All right, library card eligibility.
Okay, so where we left this last policy committee meeting was there was a request to get some more information about teacher cards. So similar to the goals of the you want to add a book to the collection in the last policy. This was, well, anyway, this was to sort out something that was an exception basically, and to give a little bit of information about what that means. It's just saying teacher cards, which I think is what we had last month, wouldn't necessarily tell people what that is. My only question is teacher cards are not subject to out of area fees, and whether or not realistically it's better to say out of area fees are waived. Camille likes that better. Thank you, Camille. I think I like that better as well because it's more in line with what's in the regional agreement. You know, we could say that you know, this would be imposed, but it's being waived rather than like this isn't subject to that.
Or waived for teacher cards. Now you capitalize it once, but not the other time, so it's going to drive some of us crazy. So,
Which would you prefer, Mike, capital or?
yeah.
Kathy, what's the ruling? Capital or not capital?
I was just saying, a teacher will.
We got two here. We got Kathy and Martha, both former teachers, so I think I would go for capital.
Capital, because it's a particular thing. You're now making it a proper noun.
Camille also suggests that local is redundant here. Educators working within the general service area. That makes sense to me. Any other thoughts?
I think that sounds good.
Oops. Speaking of teachers, you have to do this work in front of everybody. It's like when you call the kids up to the board. And then the last bit was this question about materials charged out to minors are considered to be the responsibility of parents or guardians. And the committee was asking, is this covered elsewhere? And I don't think so, because this was it was about eligibility. We had a discussion about making it clear here that if a kid who's under a minor comes in, that they would need somebody to be responsible eventually. So Martha's question is, does the sponsor, parent, guardian need to be a resident or property owner? And yes, they would have to be, unless this is, I think that gets a bit in the weeds into a procedural thing. But if you had a kid who lived here and they had a guardian who was visiting, they had a father, their parents were split and the father lived out of state and the father brought them in, but the kid lives here, we would probably try to work with them so that the kid ends up with the library card. And the kid would be the one who's eligible for the library card. So maybe the answer is no. We would need to ask Brittany for clarification there.
So under this interpretation, the eligibility depends on the residence of the
Child.
card holder. And is that not what it kind of says above? Yeah, the child is a resident.
Okay. So leave as is. Martha, does that?
Well, my question with it was the liability, because the liability goes to the adult, but you're talking about, and you know, if you have, like myself as a grandparent going to another library system, is the liability, the responsibility of the adult tied to the child's card? So as a related adult, I go in and I check out a book with the kid, and the book gets lost or whatever happens. Then is the parent of that child the responsible individual, or is the parent, or is the adult who accompanied the child?
It's the person who signed the library card application.
Okay.
So in this case, that would be if you were the one who came in and made the card with your grandchild.
Mhm.
In a database of library users, it would say Martha Ledford signed for access here. So you would be the one that the library would come to and say, hey, this book was lost.
So could we concisely summarize that by saying materials charged out, and I wonder if checked out is more common, but are considered to be the responsibility of the card holder sponsor, parentheses, parent or guardian. But you put the word sponsor.
Yeah, sponsoring.
Say specifically who it is.
Okay, so let's do one at a time. So you want checked out?
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. I mean, that's
That's terminology.
commonly used.
Yes, unless there's some circulation jargon that I'm not familiar with.
Checked out, though, is what people understand.
Charge them when they lose.
Materials checked out to minors are considered to be the responsibility of
The sponsor, the card holder's sponsor.
Or the parents or guardians who sign the
Sign.
library card
Yeah.
application.
yeah.
Although in some cases, that actually doesn't happen with the postcard registration because the postcard goes home and comes back to the library, but the parent never actually signs. I don't think.
I think that's, again, more in the weeds. That's like a
Yeah.
procedural
Okay.
thing here. And the honest truth is that there is no real link here. I'll say that publicly in this recorded meeting, but there's no link between the parent's card then and the child's card that would prevent the parent from continuing to use their own services if the child's card was delinquent.
Right, and vice versa.
We are just asking them, would you please take care, you're the person who signed for this, would you take care of this account? But they're separate entities. There's nothing, like, we're not gonna send the parent to debtor's jail or whatnot for the child's card.
Does the sponsor, I personally would like to see it come after guardian. I think the parent, the guardian, or the sponsor. And that's just because as a parent, I would want it that way. I wouldn't want my child sponsored, but that happens. That's just picture.
Well, let me make sure I understand what you're saying, because I don't think, we ask for it to be a parent or guardian, but sometimes you have to be flexible with those situations, especially in the summertime when somebody, if you had a grandchild from out of the region coming in, we don't want to deny that child's going to be here for 3 months. They don't really live here, but you do. You would be we would consider you to be the guardian.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just, the protocol, I would just like to reverse it. Responsibility of the parent, guardian, or sponsor.
So I'm not aware, that word sponsor we're using now, but I don't think that we have a definition for what that means. I think the library and the library card application just asks for parent or guardian.
So, should be up there.
I think you're right about that, yeah. I think what we really are looking for is who signed the application.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was just proposing sponsor as a concise word to
Yeah.
express
But I
that
think we should
concept.
probably,
But you're right, it's not defined.
so consider to be the responsible of the signing parent or guardian. That doesn't really work. That just sounds bad.
It would be the parent,
Sponsoring.
guardian, or the signing adult.
I think that's in the right direction. So the parent or guardian who signed the card application.
Whose signature is on the application or something like that.
Guess we probably don't need library card.
Yeah, I think that's important too, because like there are also cases where, parents are separated and one parent comes in and signs the child up for the library card and maybe they like lose books and then they come in with the other parent and that parent's like, but that didn't happen on my watch. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
yeah.
I actually had a situation at one of the libraries in
Oh.
the city. I brought my nephew in and I was told that I could not sign for him, so I had to have the parent to come in.
I think those rules have, in the last few years, we have tried to be more
flexible.
Yeah,
And
more
I think
flexible.
that's good.
Yeah. All right, so now this reads, materials checked out to minors are considered to be the responsibility of parents or guardians whose signature is on the child's card application. That's a mouthful.
Of the parent or guardian.
Materials checked out to minors are considered to be the responsibility of the parent or guardian whose signature is on the child's card application. That sounds pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
All right, so Mike, do you think that one's ready for the library board?
Last chance, if any, for any other improvements. Okay, so we will recommend this to the full board for a first reading.
Yep.
Okay, next is public comments at library board meetings. And I apologize, I'm making a poor show today because I have to leave in 10 minutes. The open issues here are that David and I have discussed, and I think we started last month. Should the main thing that's completely undefined here is number 3, which talks about available public comment slots and the remaining slots, but there's no definition of what any sort of limit would be. So one open question would be, do we want to define in advance some threshold at which, so I think what's happened in the last 2 board meetings is we really got into sort of a public hearing territory. We want all that feedback. We want everyone to have the chance to be included and share that with us. The question here is just what's the most efficient or effective format for everyone for that to happen? And probably a public hearing where we knew we're just there to listen to that feedback that day probably would have been the right thing to do. But so the question is there some trigger that would, some threshold that would somehow trigger the board to realize, oh, we by our policy, we're going to convert this topic, whatever it may be, into a public hearing. I don't love the idea of, oh, there's 15 people today, but our threshold was 10, and there's no way we would have known about that there was going to be 15 instead of 10. So you 5 have to come back next time. I don't like that. Go ahead.
Oh, go on.
Okay.
Kathy, go ahead.
Oh,
He deferred to you.
go on.
Okay.
One of you gets to speak.
What does city council do? Because it was a big hoopla
Yeah.
about that, and I think,
They make you stay till 2 o'clock in the
Well,
morning.
well, my point being is you have a sign-up sheet, and let's say it's 25 spots on that sign-up sheet. Once that sheet, and I remember when I was on the planning commission, once that sheet was filled, then you had to wait. Either you had to come back to another meeting, or city council started to say, come back at midnight. No, at the end of the meeting. But I kind of think that we limit it to only speak once. You know, you can't get up and say, oh, by the way, I'm gonna tell you this. It's 25 or 15 or whatever number. And you can come early to sign up.
When you say you can only speak once, you mean per meeting? I could sign
Yeah,
up
per
this meeting and then next
Yeah,
meeting.
because a lot of times, from what I listened to the last meeting on the video, it seems as though some people were trying to speak for somebody else.
There was
Yeah,
some of
there was-
that,
There was
yeah.
some of that. I
Yeah.
yield my time to so
Yeah,
forth.
yield my time or
When I got my point, I need to share it.
Right, right.
So I'm not sure what city council's rules are, but you're saying there's like 10 or 15, and then there's a period at the end where if people really want to,
Period.
there's like a second comment period, an overflow period.
But you can't speak but once. If you're
You
on
can't
the
do both.
first 10
Yeah.
and you listen to the meeting and something sparks your interest and you want to tell us, I'm sorry, you spoke at the beginning. So you won't. And you don't have to do it at the end, because I know we like our meetings to be short, but we also want to hear from the public. We want to be fair to everybody.
So maybe a review of what our jurisdictions are doing would be
Yeah.
useful if I came back to this committee and said, here's what the rules are in Charlottesville, Albemarle, Breen, Louisa, Nelson.
Yeah, I'm, David, I'm looking at the Albemarle County participation guide for public meetings, and it's quite extensive. So, I mean, you know, I think perhaps, yeah, a review would be that, you know, and maybe a consensus of how it's going type of thing.
I know one thing, they're not 5 minutes for any of those. They're 3 minutes everywhere.
Yeah, and I know that Albemarle in the past, if there were more than 10 speakers signed up, they would cut it to 2 minutes. So,
And that sounds good too.
Ooh,
Let me just share with everyone, this came up 5 years ago. Last time there was and the committee discussed it and the board discussed it, and I'll just tell you, I won't say who said what, although I think I kind of remember. I'll say what was said, and then we're not bound by any of that, but it's a contribution from our elders of the past. One person said, hey, if people want to show up, I want to hear from everyone who takes the time to show up. One person said, well, 3 minutes is better and they can get their point across in 3 minutes. And in fact, that kind of requires them to be more thoughtful about putting what their point is and making it concisely. And actually the committee then did forward a 3-minute recommendation to the board. And in the board meeting, someone said, yes, but not everyone has that skill to really be concise and get that together. And that thought carried the day on that day was, yeah, okay, we want to accommodate everyone with the range of skills. And so it stayed at 5. I think that was that's the relevant parts of the discussion that I can remember to share.
So I don't think there was any expectation that we were going to do any wordsmithing today. We just wanted to start a conversation about this.
Right. That was my understanding too. So,
Well, if we haven't bright ideas, we can start formulating what they are, but
Also,
yeah, Mike, based on your schedule today, perhaps we need to table this one.
you guys can talk without me. You don't need me to.
But David, I hate to do this, but what if we were to ask our peer libraries what their,
public comment policies.
and then we keep doing this to them.
No, that's fine. Yeah, no, that's a good
Just
idea.
about emergency closing too.
The thing is, this only comes up every 5 years.
Right.
I'm
Right.
looking online at some others, and some
Yeah.
say, limit comments to 3 minutes, one
So-
time per agenda,
I think that that's a good suggestion. So, and I think that based on the conversation we had last month about this, I didn't feel that there was a real push from this committee that we needed to make a change right now. It was just, we want to get the best version of
Right.
this out there. And I don't want to, I'm not interested in changing horses in midstream
Right.
while there is a lot of interest
Right.
in
Yeah.
public comment.
then it
Because
seems
then
like
you
you're
get accused
shut
of
it
like you're
down.
trying to shut down public
Yeah.
comment, which I don't think that is the board wants to
Right.
hear all the public comment. So
Right.
I think we've got some time with this is what I'm saying. So I would suggest that I'll go back and do a review of our jurisdictions, what their governing bodies do, and then also some of our peer libraries throughout the state. And then we have this discussion again next time the policy committee meets. And maybe we could do some wordsmithing in the meantime to try and clean up some of it.
And
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to. When our policy committee meets, and we discuss this particular topic, it would be nice if you had a meeting like this, as opposed to having it before the board meeting. Because I think that given the climate of what is going on now, if we have all these people coming in and they hear us discussing this, not that
Sure.
we're secret, but it's gonna be another ball of wax that we have to deal with.
What are you all thinking about this format? I like the separate meeting because it gives us a little bit of time little more space with time. Rationale for having it right before the board meeting has always been for people who are traveling. You'd have to travel once instead of twice to do separate meetings. Any thoughts for staff? I guess it kind of well, you travel twice from central to north side.
Personally, I prefer it for a lot of the reasons that Kathy said. It just gives us a chance to discuss things more fully for one, and there's not like during the policy committee meeting, there's a rush to finish things quickly so that we can get to the full board meeting.
Yeah.
But I think it's more a question for the board members probably than it is for this is the only
trade-off is just the logistical,
Right.
just the logistical convenience of for some people, it's a half-hour trip.
And I think what has made this possible the last two policy committee meetings is the hybrid format.
Right.
It's why this is worked. And if that's going to start to be more limited moving forward, then it might be easier to continue to do them in front of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, well,
Is it possible to do it that we look at the agenda and then decide whether or not it would be a separate meeting?
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
kind of what the wording of the virtual meetings and remote participation policy said, right? That the chair would kind of look and see, what the needs were and would.
Well, she's just talking about the scheduling aspect of it, not just.
Scheduling before the meeting or as a separate meeting. I mean, before the full board meeting or as a separate separate time.
I think we'd have to warn that 30 days in advance though, right?
Just 3 days.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, to Mike's point there, this is not about whether it's virtual or hybrid or in person. It's about whether or not it's going to be right before the board meeting, and that it just has to be 3 days for a public.
Right. Okay.
Earlier on the day of the board meeting, so there's more time.
Okay, yeah.
Essentially.
Also an option.
Okay, so we would normally meet again in October, right?
Yes.
So we can kind of look and see how much it's going to be. This was a big agenda today. There was a lot of stuff to cover. They're usually not that packed. So we can kind of have a conversation
Right.
online.
Well, everybody think about it between now and, early October when we'll actually put a date on the schedule, and let me know if you have preferences or thoughts. And we'll choose one or the other.
Sounds good.
Go from there.
Great.
I have to walk out, but you all can. Sounds like everybody was using that as a good reason
I have to go
to
too.
finish the meeting. All right. Any last things? Any other things for anyone else then? Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
We'll see you on Monday. Martha, Tony, see you then.
You betcha. Wouldn't miss it.
I think I'm doing that virtually on Monday.
Okay.
It depends upon a couple balls that are in the air.
A few times ago.
Yeah, we will, that's fine. On Monday, you don't have to do anything special. You can just come remotely. And then after that, we'll have to go through these new protocols. Okay.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. See you then.